You, Charlie. I am just gonna get my presentation set up. Okay, Charlie, can you confirm you can?
Yeah, we can see that. Thanks, Carla.
Okay, so hello and welcome. Thank you for taking the time to attend this webinar. The focus is on successful procurement for innovation projects in emerging sectors. So I'm going to take you through my experience of this, focusing on working with innovation and procurement, the challenges and key learnings. But before I do, I will just briefly give you some context with an overview of the Solent Future Transport Zone and specifically the project Drones for Medical Logistics. So Future Transport Zones are a trial programme funded by the Department for Transport. The aim of them is to help make journeys easier, smarter and greener. The Solent Future Transport Zone has been awarded 28.8 million from the Department for Transport to run numerous tests and trials of innovative approaches to transport across the Solent region. So as these tests and trials take place, we are conducting research, we're capturing data and inviting feedback to be able to understand whether these innovations are going to improve transport options and the way we travel. So as a programme, we have very much had a requirement for multiple procurement activities and specifically for innovative solutions. So this webinar is really kind of given in the context of one of these projects, and that one is Drones for Medical Logistics, which is how my role project manager is based. The project is researching how drones could be used to make medical logistics in the Solent area more efficient, specifically for the NHS, aiming to help improve the health outcomes and the quality of residents' lives. This project initially had a budget of £7 million. So the drone industry is, as Charlie mentioned, is very much an emerging sector, with the government awarding significant funding for future research projects, and it's now kind of at senior level, the government is now driving engagement with a regulatory body, which is the Civil Aviation Authority. There are numerous organisations now involved, such as Amazon and BT, as well as kind of many smaller like SMEs in the industry. They're all trying to get a foothold in the commercial kind of future of this sector, and especially as there's quite a lot of funding available. So the the Drones for Medical Logistics project is very much focused on outputs of drone operations, research and stakeholder engagement. And one of the main challenges is in finding the innovative solutions required to deliver these. Some of the main outputs that have required an innovative solution are the operation of delivering beyond visual line of sight flight trials, as well as a creation of a 4D booking system to show how the airspace can be managed to accommodate the flight trials. We're also looking at an airspace sensor network, which would provide sight of anything in the air that isn't transmitting its location. And also design and creation of a gust-proof drone. This will allow emergency deliveries for additional logistics options to the Isle of Wight, specifically when the weather stops the sailing of the boats that currently provide that logistics option. So finding suitable solutions for these deliverables involve procuring for innovation. So there were initially some questions we needed to answer before we got into the procurement activities, and just looking at these to start off with, we were kind of looking at whether or not drones were even a possibility for medical deliveries in the Solent and how we were going to achieve that. This would help us form our scope. And then what trials and research were needed and what did we need to prove or disprove to regulators, because we understood that the regulators at the end of the day were going to be the kind of gatekeepers to progressing drones for logistics reasons. By answering these questions, we could plan our project scope at a high level and understand where the procurement activities would actually come in. Useful maybe to add at this point, we didn't have a full understanding of how long procuring for innovation would take, which kind of meant that our planning was perhaps not as informed as it could have been. So what was our specific approach to procuring for innovation? Well, we worked with the legal and procurement teams at Portsmouth City Council, as well as internal project partners, to understand the process and procurement tasks that were required to successfully find the solutions we were looking for in order to deliver our trials. Initially, we worked with the procurement team to set up lots on the DPS, so that's the dynamic purchasing system. And this was, for those that aren't aware, this is a public procurement tool that allows buyers to purchase goods, works and services. The procurement and legal teams at Portsmouth helped us to navigate the process of procurement to understand the complexities involved. And they also fed into our planning of the procurement activities, detailing the important milestone dates and deadlines. Useful to say that deadlines are usually statutory, so you'll have specific dates that you need to hit in order to make sure that you're legally carrying out the procurement. They also facilitated the delivery of the procurement activities, sending out invites to those on the DPS, as well as important documentation such as the invitation to tender documents. In addition, they assisted in creating the invitation to tender documents, giving us templates to use and guiding us on appropriate content. They facilitated, at the point where we're ready to review and score the bids that have been submitted, they facilitated this part of the process as well. So I've put together a flow diagram, just a kind of fairly high level one, just to be able to lead you through our approach, and before following on to talk about the common challenges that we faced. The first thing we did, as mentioned, was create a DPS slot. This was just to highlight that we were interested in procuring certain services and goods in the future, and therefore the industry, once they're aware, could decide whether they wanted to sign up to it or not. We needed to advertise this to make the industry aware and encourage them to sign up. And then the next stage of this was conducting a market testing activity. The reason I've highlighted this in red is just to be able to kind of go into this in more detail. As prior to project managing this project, I'd not been involved in this type of activity, and I had no awareness of its purpose and the benefits of doing this type of activity was. So the purpose of testing the market is to check whether there's even a solution according to industry available for your problem effectively. So it's checking whether or not it's worth doing a procurement activity in this sense. So it's all about gaining a better understanding of what's available in the market prior to actually developing your strategy or creating your tender. Firstly, it ensures that your procurement strategy as a whole will align with the capabilities of the market. So there's no point building a strategy around something that the market can't actually deliver, especially if the technology is just not there yet. So once you know what the market can do, you can then tailor your procurement approach and the documentation to hopefully achieve the best outcome, which should be having numerous bids come in at that point. Market research will also provide a chance to consider alternative solutions. So you might think that the solutions will be a certain type of solution, although maybe not understanding exactly what that looks like. But this will also give you a chance to consider different types of solution and new innovations or opportunities for collaboration that you might not have previously considered. And you can also kind of see whether or not there's some parts of the market that are further ahead than others. And I guess finally, market research will also provide the opportunity to find out the likely cost of the goods and services you're seeking. So how do you know how much to make available in a budget for this particular part of the project? And this will help you determine whether the tender can be delivered within those allocated budgets. Following that, we then moved on to presenting the problem to the market. Effectively, we held I think it was a 90-minute kind of presentation whereby we presented the problem effectively, gave the opportunity for people to ask questions to ensure that they understood exactly what our problem was, to be able to understand whether they could provide a solution. And then we went on to host offer and host one-to-ones with interested suppliers that wanted to go on further to clarify our problem and to delve a bit deeper into the detail. The kind of strength of those activities is that we were then able to create procurement documents that were effectively aligned with what we understood about the market, and that would invite as many people to provide a bid as possible before going on to issue the tender. Once the bids had been submitted, we held events in order to demonstrate that their solution would actually work. And we then, as a team, reviewed and scored the bids before awarding and creating a contract. Moving on to the challenges now. There are many challenges during this activity, and I'm just going to highlight the main ones and explain how we overcame those challenges. So the first one being that the challenge in accessing suppliers and ensuring that we'd included everybody we could. So how do you know who should be on your DPS lot, who signed up to your DPS lot? How do you advertise the DPS existence, for example? So a lot of people don't realise the DPS is there if you haven't engaged with the market or understood the stakeholders. Then you might not realise who needs to be on the DPS. So there needs to be a bit of work at the start to understand that. Also, the SMEs and startups can be excluded due to scale or process complexity, while overly rigid frameworks, for example, deter any new entrants. They may feel that they can't provide what's needed. And we attacked this really by making sure that we started stakeholder activities earlier than you normally would in a general project life cycle. So we didn't wait until discovery phase. We needed to know before that and identify whether or not the solution even exists or is possible. So we attended conferences and exhibitions and spoke to the industry to aid this, and to also allow our local authority to determine whether or not we needed extra external consultants and to what extent. Secondly, understanding the market and supplier capabilities, so knowing who the market is and what their technology capabilities are. There's often a lack of early dialogue with suppliers, as mentioned, and missed opportunities for co-creation and insight. And the outcome of this is that it can narrow the supplier participation, and what you're trying to do is make sure as many suppliers as possible participate, so you're getting a real selection of solutions available to you. So in order to rise to this particular challenge, we, as mentioned in detail, we planned and delivered market testing activity to ensure we'd engage with the industry, having those conversations where, diving to the bottom of whether or not there are solutions available, whether the technology is capable or not. And we did this before we did the invitation to tender, so that our documents were in the best place possible to make sure that we engage with as many people, as many suppliers. We conducted market research, both online as well as with suppliers, to understand capabilities, and we reached out to similar organisations to see what they do to source a particular good or service. For example, we became members of a group called RPAS, and what they do is disseminate information between group members, highlighting when certain procurements are being run, highlighting who organisations are, and connecting everybody, effectively a networking organisation. We attended industry conferences and exhibitions so that we could engage with the industry directly. Sometimes those conversations you will have at an exhibition that are fairly informal can be most informative, and you can it will lead you down other paths which kind of flag to you what the capability of the market is. Thirdly, being overly specific in outlining the solution, telling the prospective bidders effectively what the solution should be is a challenge. It limits creative responses from suppliers, which can also lead to kind of safe, repetitive solutions, which is obviously not what we're looking for when we're looking for innovation. So we focused on how instead of what outcomes are desired. We looked at we obviously worked on the invitation to tender documents, ensuring that they were not asking for a solution specific. We were looking at what the problem was and making sure that we were clear in telling everyone what the problem was, and that we needed a solution for this. And finally, one of the bigger challenges is how you evidence a working solution for innovation, getting people to prove their solution actually works. And one of the reasons it's a challenge is because there are very few metrics to prove innovation success. Additionally, it takes time to be able to plan in things like live demonstrations, especially if they're countrywide, or evidence proving activities. So once people have bid, getting them to prove their solution actually works. As mentioned, live demonstrations are key. There's nothing better than seeing something working to know that it works, but you will really need to make sure you lean on your technical experts to check it thoroughly, so that it doesn't just look like it works on the surface, but it is a proven solution. You can seek assurance through references or examples of other work that they've done. But really, if suppliers can't prove that their solution works, and it looks more like this is research and development, this may be okay, but you'll definitely need to add a risk to your RAID or risks to your RAID log and define the mitigations in case the supplier can't, in the end, provide the solution. And I'll speak more on this as we move along. So in addition to the general challenges I've covered, you could also consider the public sector related challenges. Firstly, there is limited experience managing innovation-oriented procurement. Due to the nature of public sector delivery, research and innovation projects are not often delivered, and therefore we don't usually have a knowledgeable resource at our fingertips to lead in-house or internally, and so we hand the management of the project over to an external consultant. And oftentimes it can be consultants that aren't fully aligned with the public sector culture and our needs to ensure that we are not misspending public funds. So for this reason, local authorities aren't building up any internal knowledge and understanding of procurement for innovation, and are relying a little bit too much on consultants. And to resolve this, we should probably allow project managers to build awareness of the industry or goods of services, and it could form part of an initial phase of discovery to better inform the scope and costs of an innovative project. And we're effectively asking local authorities to budget more upfront in order to do these activities. Secondly, risk-averse culture within organisations. This is where we look to others to lead. So as previously mentioned, lean on consultants. By nature, we're risk averse, with a priority to avoid the misspending of public funds in the short term. Anything innovative that doesn't have a proven track record of success for procuring, so procuring for innovation is not really commonplace, and therefore again it's looking to local authorities to start feeling empowered to fund initial stakeholder management or engagement activities and other kind of discovery activities much earlier on, so that much earlier on than a non-innovation based project. So on our normal projects, we don't usually have to do that. We can rely on the agile and waterfall methodologies and follow those kind of in that more structured way. But where innovations involved, we need information much earlier on, and we need to be making kind of stakeholder or building stakeholder relationships much earlier on in order to get the information we need. And the outcome of this could mean much better scope, more accurate scope, more value for money in avoiding the activities that aren't required, and a more realistic upfront planning, which will in turn lead to realistic costs being approximated. And thirdly, misalignment between teams. So those are teams like your legal, financial teams and your service teams. Culturally, local authority teams can work in siloed ways, which means that it's more challenging to deliver procurement for innovation because there are often barriers in business processes, which mean that we're not aligned. So understanding where these barriers are and how they impact on time and costs also needs to be identified early. And again, budgeting needs to allow for these initial discovery tasks. So it could be things simple as in finance teams, there are certain forms that have got to be filled in, certain kind of sign-offs that are required, which means that your timescales are a lot longer than you'd originally considered for this type of innovation procurement activities. So moving on to procuring a solution, and I've said here, you know, we need a solution that achieves, and it's again going back to that not being too prescriptive in your invitation to tender documents, creating an invitation to tender that doesn't define the solution. We want to leave that open to creative responses. Hopefully you'll be supported by a procurement team to understand all the legal processes involved, and this will help guide you in turn in understanding the things that you need to do, as well as provide before you can go out to tender. When you're ready to issue your tender, you'll have created a pack of documents. I've referred to this. It's called the ITT, which is the Invitation to Tender documents, and this includes a specification document. This document is probably one of the most important that the other ones hinge from, and it outlines the problem statement as well as any background information, who you are, why you're doing what you're doing, and a small set of requirements. So in terms of what the purpose is of this specification document, it's identifying what you're trying to solve. So you should be clear and concise and in providing that description of the problem. You need to focus on the need and not the solution. For example, in our case, there was a need to identify non-transponding aircraft in a particular area of airspace, but we were not saying how it should be provided. We weren't telling the potential suppliers what types of sensors they should use and where they should place them. We were literally just telling them what our problem was and giving a few requirements to that in terms of needing the sensors to operate for 24 hours a day, for example. So it also forms a foundation for innovation procurement. So by focusing on the outcomes rather than rigid requirements, it uses evaluation criteria that encourage the creativity and new approaches in the responses of the bidders. An innovation-focused ITT will hopefully give the suppliers the freedom to be able to suggest kind of new and fresh, creative solutions to the problem. So in issuing a tender to seek the innovative solutions, how do we assess the bids if they are mostly solutions that are not fully proven? And like I mentioned earlier, they can be kind of research and development, which may be okay if we're accepting that as a risk in terms of the outcome. But the quality assessment criteria and the score weighting are going to really help with identifying a successful, who the successful bid is going to be. The quality assessment criteria are the standards that are used to evaluate how well each supplier's proposal meets the buyer's needs. So you'll need to seek guidance from your procurement team or a procurement team on the categories that you're going to have, but it would really be down to you to decide which questions you're going to ask. In this respect, we utilised our technical team to help us frame the questions. And the reason we did that was to ensure that we got responses which highlighted the understanding of the suppliers and the integrity of their proposed solution. So without our technical team's input, we wouldn't have been able to understand what was the most important technical kind of questions to be answered. So in addition to this, as mentioned, the score weighting is really important, and we thought quite carefully about this. Score weighting is used because not all aspects of the tender are equally important. Weighting makes sure the most critical elements have the biggest impact on the final decision. For example, we wanted to make sure that the quality of the solution was more important than a cheaper price. And this is aimed at preventing kind of the cheapest wins type scenario when quality or safety is more important. It also reflects the priorities, it ensures fair comparison, it supports transparent, defensible decisions, which you might rely on later on if you get any challenges from the bidders. And it also aligns the supplier proposals with your strategic goals. So when an ITT is written really well, it does a lot of the heavy lifting for you. It will bring everyone together on the same page, helps prevent scope creep, and gives the suppliers the clarity they need to be able to bring forward their most kind of creative and innovative solutions. But once you've issued the tender, and you've hopefully been successful in having received a number of bids, what can you do to ensure success and that you have, as far as possible, mitigated the issue of the supplier not eventually being able to deliver the solution that you need? So I've put together just a few bullets here to say, to kind of explain what we did. We actually ensured that, because we looked at the quality assessment questions in the tender documentation to make sure that they were framed correctly to be able to provide assurance of the integrity of the organisations responding, and to be able to check that their responses can be corroborated by either evidence or references if need be. As mentioned earlier, we also asked for live demonstrations. We wanted to know that that their product or solution could do what they said it could, but you'll need to ensure that you stipulate exactly what needs to be proven in the demonstration, and most importantly, have your technical experts there on hand to check the integrity of their output to make sure that it's not in any way kind of a true reflection of the working product. And a realistic plan will also allow, allowing time for multiple potentially on-site demonstrations. And like I said, this could, depending on the project, it could be across the country. So you need to allow time to fit in demonstrations that you might have to be at in person. And finally, by working hand in hand with the legal team, as mentioned earlier, we worked with the Portsmouth City Council legal team. They supported us to do or to complete the contractual elements. The contract will need to be structured in a particular way to ensure that deliverables are aligned with milestone payments, building in financial penalties, for example, for delayed delivery, as well as the ability to bring things to a close if the supplier is not able to achieve the contractual deliverables. So key takeaways, the main things I wanted to share with you and to reflect on. Innovation procurement can deliver better outcomes and value. So when we open the door to innovation, we're looking for something that may not yet exist, and it gives suppliers a space to bring fresh thinking. So it's really valuable to do these procurements. Stakeholder management is a key part of a successful procurement. When the kind of correct or right people are engaged early on and consistently, it helps to define the project through a deeper understanding of the industry and its goals. And specifically when it comes to procurement in an innovative environment, it will raise your awareness of the market, who and what who people are and what they're kind of offering, effectively what's out there. Of course, innovation procurement is not without challenge. However, with clear communication, setting realistic timelines and a structured process, those barriers can definitely be managed and overcome. Strong ITT is the key foundation. So by describing the problem statement effectively and what we need, without dictating to the suppliers what the solution should be, we're giving the suppliers freedom to be innovative while keeping everyone headed in the right direction. Fifth in the list of key takeaways, allowing enough time for the process of procuring for innovation. So this is, I mean, there is no kind of, it all depends on the project in terms of the activities you need to conduct, what the market's like in the industry. So there's no set time for this, but it's important to remember that, gathering the robust evidence of delivery, so knowing that they can provide or deliver what they say they can, that takes time. So building in that space early on, it will help to kind of ensure that you can properly assess the progress and make confident decisions, and not least kind of upward report how long the whole process is going to take. And finally, creating meaningful contracts that align payments to milestone delivery. This is where we tie payments to clear milestones, which can be a very simple but powerful safeguard. It keeps the delivery on track, for example, ensures accountability and protects funding by making sure we're only paying for what has genuinely been achieved. And lastly, just some handy tips I've put together for writing an ITT for innovation procurement. So firstly, clear and concise, use plain language, nothing technical that could be a barrier to applicants. Make sure it's outcome focused and not prescriptive, avoid specifying the solution as we've explained. Define the need, impact and success metrics, ensuring there's some measurable outcomes, and looking to a solution agnostic approach, which will avoid kind of being overly broad or kind of or vague challenges effectively. And lastly, thank you. And I guess moving on to questions, which I believe Charlie's going to facilitate.
Thanks, Carla. Thank you for that. A really interesting presentation. I think procurement is such a massive challenge when it comes to doing stuff that's innovative and new, and particularly with some of the emerging sectors that are coming into the UK. I'm thinking of driverless vehicles over in London, more and more people having to battle with the challenge of how they incorporate AI into daily work. There's so much stuff that local authorities are going to have to sink their teeth into in the coming weeks. So yes, I will make mics available for everybody, so people can ask questions should they wish to do so. We don't currently have any questions in the chat from what I can see, but I had a question that I wanted to ask about the market testing approach that you took. It sounds like, in comparison to perhaps other projects that you've worked on in your career, that the process of market testing almost is one of the most important parts when you're dealing with an emerging technology. And you talked in the presentation about allocating budget for that within the project plan to make sure that you have the budget available to go and attend exhibitions, conferences, etc. Can you give any indication, perhaps percentage wise, about what a percent of the budget might need to be committed to that kind of area, or what percentage of the budget or spend ended up being used from your project to deliver that kind of activity?
In terms of percentage of the project, I mean, it would all depend really on what the project was on, what the sector or industry is like. You know, for example, with drones for medical logistics, there are no, everything is kind of London or Manchester based or international, so that kind of extends your budget to be able to kind of explore and attend these things. So I think it's probably too difficult to kind of say that there's a percentage of your budget that you should use, but it needs to be something that's considered right at the start. So you need to identify where you need to be and who you need to speak to, whether there's so the time kind of needed is one aspect of but spending a budget, kind of doing some exploring of the stakeholder and the market, and then that will help you to inform what you could attend that will be useful, and to understand what that kind of budget looks like. Obviously, being local authority, we have to make sure that if we can avoid attending in person but still get the same value, that's an option. We have to kind of look for other ways other than attending conferences and exhibitions if we can, such as joining kind of a group that, like a networking organisation like we did with our pass, which was relatively cheap compared to attending multiple conferences, for example. But you can also lean on them to tell you what are the most important things to be part of. So yeah, in answer to your question, I wouldn't be able to kind of say what a kind of percentage of a budget you would need to apply to the stakeholder or the market research. It would have to be one of those very early on activities you'd need to conduct in order to answer that, I think. And it would be very dependent on what it is you're looking for. It might be that the only option for you is sourcing things from abroad. Well, and in that case, if you have to visit places in person, it's going to really dictate a different budget compared to nationally.
Do you think I imagine that having those conversations around market testing, that people might receive some pushback from senior leaders, senior management, about the need to go off and do these things? Do you have any tips about how to tackle those perhaps more difficult conversations? Yeah,
I think that in collaboration with perhaps your team, perhaps your line manager, it's about kind of highlighting the value of things before you ask for them. So having that kind of project plan and the value for the activities that you're hoping to have signed off, having that kind of already in place before kind of seeking to go to something that's going to cost money. I think that's kind of essential. And like I say, kind of showing the impact of this. You can easily explain, well, how can we know our scope if we don't know what the industry wants, or what the industry is doing? More importantly, how can we say that we're going to budget for this particular thing, but we don't know if anybody else has done it yet, or parts of it. So without kind of understanding any of that, it's very difficult to create a project scope, and to know that what you've got is, USPs in terms of your delivery.
Thank you. That's really helpful. A question from Rob. Go ahead, Rob.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can.
Great. Thanks, Carla. That was really interesting. I was wondering whether, because it's an innovation project, did you kind of attract more or less SME kind of smaller organisations than expected, and were there any kind of considerations you gave to that as part of the process of drafting the procurement itself?
We did attract SMEs. Sorry, remind me of the second part of that question, Rob.
Was there any kind of consideration given to that as part of the drafting of the documentation? Was it kind of encouraged, or any kind of special, I guess, work done to maybe onboard or bring SMEs kind of into the conversation?
So I think in terms of when we were framing our specification and when we were looking at the quality assessment as well, with the support of our procurement team, we understood that it might not be possible for an SME to provide a solution on their own. So we allowed within our specification, we allowed the potential suppliers to be able to collaborate with each other and form, like a coalition, as opposed to just kind of delivering as a single SME. And then what this did was it encouraged SMEs to take part, to join forces and collaborate on the solution, to be able to present it in that way, as opposed to kind of a single large organisation being able to deliver the solution on their own in isolation. Did that answer the question, Rob?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Thanks, Carla. I can't see any more questions in the chat. Unless there are any more questions that people would like to ask who are in attendance, I think we may call the session to a close there.